This is Land of Havilah, 2 Chronicles 29. In the last chapter, Ahaz inherited a strong kingdom, but he pursued foreign gods. He even shut down the temple of Yahweh. Therefore Yahweh sent invaders from all directions, and after 16 years, the kingdom was much poorer, weaker, and smaller in terms of population and geographical size. Ahaz died at the age of 36 and left a disaster to his son Hezekiah. Verse 1. Hezekiah began to reign when he was 25 years old, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah. He did that which was right in Yahweh's eyes, according to all that David his father had done. Comment: as Hezekiah is taking over, Judah's so weak right now, and morale must be so low, it's hard to see how they can survive as a nation. But Yahweh's still on his throne, and in verse 2 we're feeling positive that Hezekiah did that which was right in Yahweh's eyes. In verse 1, when Hezekiah began to reign, he was 25. If we do the math, either Ahaz fathered him when he was 11, which could be possible, or the numbers might be off somehow. In Hezekiah's first month, verse 1, in the first year of his reign, in the first month, he opened the doors of Yahweh's house and repaired them. He brought in the priests and the Levites and gathered them together into the wide place on the east, and said to them, Listen to me, you Levites, now sanctify yourselves and sanctify Yahweh, the God of your father's house, and carry the filthiness out of the holy place. For our fathers were unfaithful and have done that which was evil in Yahweh our God's sight, and have forsaken him, and have turned away their faces from the habitation of Yahweh, and turned their backs. Also they shut up the doors of the porch, and put out the lamps, and have not burned incense nor offered burnt offerings in the holy place to the God of Israel. Therefore Yahweh's wrath was on Judah and Jerusalem, and he's delivered them to be tossed back and forth, to be an astonishment and a hissing, as you see with your eyes. For behold, our fathers have fallen by the sword, and our sons and our daughters and our wives are in captivity for this. Now it's in my heart to make a covenant with Yahweh, the God of Israel, that his fierce anger may turn away from us. My sons, don't be negligent now, for Yahweh's chosen you to stand before him, to minister to him, that you should be his ministers and burn incense. Comment in verse 3, Hezekiah opened the doors of Yahweh's house because his father had, quote, shut up the doors of Yahweh's house. 2 Chronicles 28:24. With a kingdom that was falling apart, Hezekiah had a lot of problems needing his attention, but he recognized getting right with Yahweh was job number one. He moved it to the top of his list, first month, first year. In verse 7, Hezekiah said, They put out the lamps and have not burned incense or offered burnt offerings. In other words, there's been no service to Yahweh in the temple at all. The temple's been completely shut down. The shutting down by Ahaz put the priests and Levites out of work. In verse 4, Hezekiah called them back. By this time, some of them would be passed away, some of them too aged, and certainly the rest were doing other things. The younger ones had no experience. It was a major accomplishment to get them organized again. In verses 4 and 5, Hezekiah addressed them in the wide place on the east, meaning in the courtyard in front of the temple. The temple faced east. He told them to sanctify themselves and Yahweh. Yahweh didn't need any sanctification, but the priests and Levites needed to give him his proper respect, is what he was saying. As for sanctifying themselves, they should make themselves ceremonially clean according to all the instructions in the law of Moses. That was all external, but internally they needed to commit themselves. Quote, You shall love Yahweh your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Deuteronomy 6:5. Hezekiah commanded them to, quote, carry the filthiness out of the holy place, end quote. There are no details what was in the holy place, but whatever it was, it didn't belong. This all points to you and me that to return to God, we have to make it our first priority, reorganize our lives, come back from whatever distant place we're in, sanctify ourselves to serve him, and get rid of whatever doesn't belong, because we're the temple of the Holy Spirit. As we do all this, from verse 11, quote, My sons, don't be negligent now, for Yahweh has chosen you to stand before him, end quote. In verses 8 and 9, Hezekiah rightly diagnosed the problem in Judah that Yahweh's wrath was on them. His solution in verse 10 was to make a covenant with Yahweh, which is what you and I need to do. Yahweh already made a covenant with Israel hundreds of years before and said it was for all generations, but the people weren't born then. They inherited Yahweh's offer, but the offer didn't apply to them unless they observed it. Same with us. We can't ride on our parents' relationship with God or any previous generation. We have to join the covenant for ourselves. Now, a listing of 14 Levite leaders who will get the job done, verse 12. Then the Levites arose, Mahath the son of Amasai, and Joel the son of Azariah, of the sons of the Kohathites and of the sons of Merari, Kish the son of Abdi, and Azariah the son of Jehalaleel, and of the Gershonites, Joah the son of Zimmah, and Eden the son of Joah. And of the sons of Elizaphan, Shimri and Juel, and of the sons of Asaph, Zechariah and Mattaniah, and of the sons of Heman, Jehuel and Shimei, and of the sons of Jeduthun, Shemaiah and Uzziel. They gathered their brothers, sanctified themselves, and went in, according to the commandment of the king by Yahweh's words, to cleanse Yahweh's house. The priest went into the inner part of Yahweh's house to cleanse it, and brought out all the uncleanness that they found in Yahweh's temple into the court of Yahweh's house. The Levites took it from there to carry it out to the brook Kidron. Coming up, they started cleansing the temple on New Year's Day of the Hebrew calendar, which is in the spring, and they didn't finish until the 16th, so they missed Passover, which was supposed to be on the 14th. Verse 17. Now they began on the first day of the first month to sanctify, and on the 8th day of the month they came to Yahweh's porch. They sanctified Yahweh's house in 8 days, and on the 16th day of the first month they finished. They went in to Hezekiah the king within the palace and said, "We've cleansed all Yahweh's house, including the altar of burnt offering with all its vessels, and the table of showbread with all its vessels. Moreover, all the vessels which King Ahaz in his reign threw away when he was unfaithful have we prepared and sanctified. Behold, they are before Yahweh's altar." Comment: the temple's been cleansed and sanctified according to the procedures and the law of Moses. The next thing coming up will be to offer sin offerings for the king, the leaders, the priests, and the Levites, and all Judah and Israel, because in the law, quote, "Without the shedding of blood there is no forgiveness of sin," Hebrews 9:22 and Leviticus 17:11. Everything coming up will be according to procedure in the law. Verse 20. Then Hezekiah the king arose early, gathered the princes of the city, and went up to Yahweh's house. They brought 7 bulls, 7 rams, 7 lambs, and 7 male goats for a sin offering for the kingdom, for the sanctuary, and for Judah. He commanded the priests, the sons of Aaron, to offer them on Yahweh's altar. So they killed the bulls, and the priest received the blood and sprinkled it on the altar. They killed the rams and sprinkled the blood on the altar. They also killed the lambs and sprinkled the blood on the altar. They brought near the male goats for the sin offering before the king and the assembly, and they laid their hands on them. Then the priests killed them, and they made a sin offering with their blood on the altar to make atonement for all Israel, for the king commanded that the burnt offering and the sin offering should be made for all Israel. Comment: now according to the procedures set up by King David, who was a prophet, and the prophets of his time, Gad and Nathan, verse 25. He set the Levites in Yahweh's house with cymbals, with stringed instruments, and with harps, according to the commandment of David, of Gad the king's seer, and Nathan the prophet, for the commandment was from Yahweh by his prophets. The Levites stood with David's instruments, and the priests with the trumpets. Hezekiah commanded them to offer the burnt offering on the altar. When the burnt offering began, Yahweh's song also began, along with the trumpets and David king of Israel's instruments. All the assembly worshipped, the singers sang, and the trumpeters sounded. All this continued until the burnt offering was finished. When they had finished offering, the king and all who were present with him bowed themselves and worshipped. Moreover, Hezekiah the king and the princes commanded the Levites to sing praises to Yahweh with the words of David and of Asaph the seer. They sang praises with gladness, and they bowed their heads and worshipped. Comment: now that the mandatory sin offerings have been completed and they've given Yahweh his rightful place in praise, it's time for any voluntary offerings. Verse 31. Then Hezekiah answered, "Now you've consecrated yourselves to Yahweh. Come near and bring sacrifices and thank offerings into Yahweh's house." The assembly brought in sacrifices and thank offerings, and as many as were of a willing heart brought burnt offerings. The number of the burnt offerings which the assembly brought was 70 bulls, 100 rams, and 200 lambs. All these were for a burnt offering to Yahweh. The consecrated things were 600 head of cattle and 3,000 sheep. Coming up, because the priesthood has been inactive and some priests were too slow to drop what they were doing and cleanse themselves, there's a labor shortage in performing the sacrifices, verse 34. But the priests were too few so that they could not flay all the burnt offerings. Therefore their brothers, the Levites, helped them until the work was ended and until the priest had sanctified themselves, for the Levites were more upright in heart to sanctify themselves than the priests. Also the burnt offerings were in abundance with the fat of the peace offerings and with the drink offerings for every burnt offering. So the service of Yahweh's house was set in order. Hezekiah and all the people rejoiced because of that which God had prepared for the people, for the thing was done suddenly. It all took place suddenly in less than a month. For us, the sacrifice has been done already. Christ sacrificed for us. He's ready when we are. We must make him our first priority. Let's not be negligent. It might take some major reordering of our lives, and there are some things we need to clean up, but he's still on the throne and he'll enable us. He can turn us around suddenly. We talk about our responsibilities and the need for repentance, all the effort we need to put out, and it's true, we shouldn't be negligent. But at the same time, Yahweh's the driving force of it, as Hezekiah and all the people knew in verse 36. It was all, quote, because of that which God had prepared for the people, end quote. 2 Chronicles 30 is next.